Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you for attending today's webcast, Starting and Maintaining a Successful Boutique Firm, hosted by LexisNexis. Today's 60-minute program will cover what you should consider before opening a boutique firm, how to open one, pros and cons, and what mistakes to avoid. Today's program is not for CLE credit and purely informational. Your lines are currently muted. At the end of this session, we will unmute your lines to allow for questions. You may also use the I Am feature located at the top of your screen to ask questions at any time during the presentation. We hope you find this session valuable. Within a few days, you will receive an email with a recording of this webcast along with a survey. Please take time to respond to this survey to help us improve, as well as to suggest additional topics of interest to you. And now please allow me to introduce today's speakers. With more than 35 years of experience practicing law, Paul Dorohansian II is an active trial lawyer focusing on civil and criminal litigation, white-collar crime, election law, and trust and estate cases in state and federal courts. Paul is the principal of the law firm Dorohansian & Dorohansian based in Albany, New York, and acts as local counsel to several major law firms and corporations. He is the author of Sexual Assault Trials, a 2-volume book now in its 4th edition, and articles in the area of trial strategy and techniques. Paul began his career in law after graduating from Georgetown University and Albany Law School, and has served as the head of the Albany County District Attorney's Special Assault Unit for 22 years before entering private practice. Throughout his career, Paul has received several prestigious awards, including the NAACP's Thurgood Marshall Award and the coveted Lecturer of Merit Award from the National College of District Attorneys. He has written and lectured extensively throughout the United States on the topics of trial tactics and sexual assault as a member of numerous law associations. Our next speaker, Ryan D. Stump, represents clients in criminal defense matters in both the federal and state court systems, located across North Carolina for charges ranging from traffic tickets to first-degree murder. As founder and managing partner of Randall & Stump, PLLC, Mr. Stump's goal is to provide unparalleled representation to his clients while treating them like the people they are, not as file numbers. Mr. Stump has continued his legal education by attending both state and national DWI education seminars, the White Collar Criminal Defense College at Stetson University, and the National Criminal Defense College's Trial Practice Institute in Macon, Georgia. In 2014, Mr. Stump was nominated and awarded as a Top 100 Trial Lawyer and Top 40 Under 40 Trial Lawyer by the National Trial Lawyers Association. In September of 2015, Mr. Stump attended and graduated from the Trial Lawyers College, Boy, Wyoming, with founded prominent trial lawyer Jerry Spence. The Trial Lawyers College is the only one of its kind in the United States. Only 100 lawyers from across the United States are accepted per year and undergo an extensive 3-week course to improve their trial skills. Mr. Stump also handles complex civil litigation for personal injury and civil rights cases. Since 1998, our third speaker, Samuel J. Randall IV, has built a solid reputation among his peers, adversaries, and the judiciary in North Carolina as an aggressive and skilled criminal defense lawyer and advocate for his clients. Mr. Randall has represented hundreds of clients in criminal defense matters in the federal and state courts of North Carolina. Mr. Randall's clients have been accused of every crime in the book, ranging from the most serious of matters, such as first-degree murder and drug trafficking, to lesser charges, such as shoplifting and traffic violations. His commitment to representing individuals charged by the state and federal government led Mr. Randall to become a board-certified specialist in both state and federal criminal law by the North Carolina State Bar in 2004. Currently, there are over 28,000 licensed attorneys in North Carolina, but only 53 are specialists in both state and federal criminal law. In 1987, Mr. Randall joined the United States Navy and served as a hospital corpsman until he was honorably discharged in 1991. During his time in the Navy, Mr. Randall became qualified as an air crew member and performed search and rescue missions as an in-flight medical technician. He is a Gulf War veteran, having served with HMM 226 during Operation Desert where he provided in-flight medical assistance to wounded troops. After the Navy, Mr. Randall attended the University of North Carolina at Wilmington, where he received his Bachelor of Arts degree in Philosophy and Religion. Mr. Randall received his law degree from California Western School of Law in San Diego, California. In 2012, Mr. Randall graduated from the Jerry Spence Trial Lawyers College in Wyoming, and in 2013 graduated from both graduate programs offered by the Trial Lawyers College. Mr. Randall is a life member of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. The floor is yours.
Well, this is Paul Daronessian, and I want to thank everyone for joining us, and hopefully we'll be able to give you some insight into our experiences that we have found to be keys to our success in setting up practices which focus on a couple of key areas. So an overview of some of the key principles that we're going to be discussing today, the three of us, is I think the first one is one of the keys to being successful, and that's finding what you want to do and doing it well. That's not always the easiest thing to do. Sometimes you don't know all the areas, and I'll mention a couple ways of delving into some other areas of law to find out if you like them or not. But one of the keys here is to be extremely motivated and interested in what it is that you like about the law, what it is that you want to practice. And the second key component of this is you're the driver of the bus. You decide who's going to get on with you. That is what makes running your boutique firm, your small practice, different from a large firm or even a government assignment where you're given cases and given clients. So we want to talk about how you go about identifying clients that fit what you want to do and fit your practice. And then we want to talk about how you develop skills and traits in the areas that you like so that you develop recognition for those traits and ability to practice in certain areas. And I think one of the key points that I want to make today is how important other lawyers are in running a boutique law firm. Other attorneys who support what you do and how your adversaries can help you. And we're going to talk about how technology can help, but how there's certain legacy means of communication that are still important. Any type of practice today has to be concerned about marketing. We've got some ideas on how to market yourself and different ways you can present yourself that help develop your identity. And finally, I'm going to mention a little bit about money and the role of money and capitalization in running a successful boutique practice. And finally, how pro bono cases can be a means not only of developing identity and finding out what areas you like, but really reaching out into the community as well as working and developing contacts with other law firms, and how that has been very successful in our case here at our firm.
This is Sam Randall. I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the sub-things. As you'll see throughout the program, a lot of the topics kind of intertwine. The motivation factor for a boutique firm, speaking from my own personal experience, one of the major factors was I got tired of doing what is commonly referred to as front door law, basically waiting on whoever comes through the front door and trying to handle their situation. By having a more focused practice, it allows you to gain more knowledge, be more experienced in that area, and provide better services for your clients. Also, by doing that, you gain recognition and hopefully a better quality of life. Some of the identify the aspects of law and the practice that you enjoy. Having been a solo practitioner for a number of years, I was exposed to a number of different areas of the law, ultimately choosing criminal defense as the area that I wanted to practice in. It gave me the most enjoyment, the most challenges, both in my professional and personal life in dealing with other people's problems. For each of you, identifying what area that you would want to go into is a personal choice. You have to balance not only is this an area that I enjoy, but ultimately, am I going to be able to survive doing it? So you need to look both at the practice aspect and the business aspect. Part of getting into the boutique law firm is, again, that specialization. You become a student of the law. And in that, you maintain your, what's the best way to say this? You're able to immerse yourself in every aspect of a specific topic within your specialization. You're able to identify issues that someone that is not specialized may not pick up. And you're able to identify weaknesses or areas that you need to improve so you can develop your skills. With our firm, we have more of a regional office. We do a lot of federal criminal defense, which takes us basically all around the state. For others, they may want to just practice within a certain town or a local region, and maybe not a statewide or a national practice. So in identifying not only the area of law that which you want to practice, you also want to look at the geographical area. Is where you are going to support the type of law that you want to do.
If I could make a few comments on this also, I think it's really important to study the area of law that you're interested in. Read the journals, read articles, read cases in your area, and be on top of the area of law. And if that's what you're going to do, you want the cases that allow you to do that. We recently had a homicide case where it was mainly a legal case, and it was one primarily because of what we enjoy doing, which is research and writing and developing the law. And that's the type of case we wanted. So as was mentioned earlier, a lot of these points are going to kind of intertwine at times. And the last point that's being made here is, too, when you decide what you want to do and what you like doing and looking for your clients and the attorneys to work with, there's a geographic question, too. How far out do you want to expand your net? One of the things we found in following some of these guidelines was to be successful in the areas that we were interested in, we had to expand our net. And New York State's a big area. We go from Long Island out to Rochester, Buffalo, to take those cases that we feel we can make a difference in, and also the cases that we wanted to do. So that's kind of a fundamental decision you have to make. That means where you will be identifying on the web, for example, your practice area, as well as the attorneys that you're going to be looking for to connect with in developing your practice.
And that's a good point. Thank you, Paul.
So
this is Ryan Stump, and I'll be talking a little bit about the criteria and identifying the type of client you want. Obviously, clients are what pays the bills, so getting the right ones in the door is what's going to ultimately make you the most successful. In my time practicing, one of the biggest gold mines that I've found is your current client base. Not just as if they're going to potentially be a repeat client, but most of them, or it's not all, have friends that engage in the same behavior they do, or family as well. Even if they don't, those folks may need help with certain legal matters, whether it be a will or reviewing a contract, an employment issue down the road that could easily create some reoccurring business for you. In the criminal side, which is what I'll speak about mostly, for example, I handle a criminal case. I either take it to trial, the client's found not guilty, or I'm able to have it dismissed pre-trial. That can easily parlay into now I file an expungement for them, so now I have reoccurring business coming through the door. Another important thing is and I found this out pretty early on in my career, is making sure you find clients that are going to help you develop the skills you want down the road. I do 100% litigation, and so does Sam as well. So finding clients that, it may not be the sexiest case, it may not be the case that is going to be the easiest, but at the end of the day, I know taking a tougher case to trial and thinking through and working through that case is going to ultimately help me in the long run, even down the road on easier cases. Another thing that does is it puts the bug in the idea in prosecutors and judges' eyes that down the road or later on a different case, you're not exactly the person that is going to easily roll over, which is going to help you get better outcomes and results for the client. Always keep in mind that the profile of the client is never going to be the same for all practice areas. I do a lot of white-collar cases, and that clientele is completely different than clients that are involved in creating or making a meth lab at their home, or that are selling dope that or get caught up in federal court. I mean, it's just a different client base. You have to approach each client base from a different perspective. As far as reaching out to potential clients, I caution folks on this simply because you want to be careful not to solicit business. That's something that I understand everybody's from different areas of the country that are tuning in, and the best thing I would do is consult the local bar on that. With reaching out to potential clients, one thing I will say, it's always good to attend functions and events that could potentially have clients that you represent. So for DWI cases, any beer festival, parades, any big-time event we have here in Charlotte, it's always good to be out there because people are drinking, and unfortunately a lot of them like to drive home afterwards after they've had a couple too many. So just getting the word out, the bug in everybody's ear, this is what you do, this is how you can help if they ever need it, or if they know somebody that does. As far as explaining yourself to the client, the best thing you can always be is honest. You don't want to embed in their mind or in their ear that you're going to give them some unreasonable result, because at the end of the day, that's just going to hurt you in the long run. If you haven't had the most experience in a certain case or a certain type of or area of law, be honest about it. Just because you aren't the most experienced doesn't mean you won't be the best person they can hire. What I've seen is that, especially early on, clients appreciated the effort that I put into cases. While I wasn't the most experienced person they had talked to, they did appreciate that I was more hungry than the guy who had been practicing for 30-some years, that, it's just another run-of-the-mill case for him. He's got a heavy caseload. They're not going to get the personal attention they want. And then the big thing on this slide is don't be afraid to say no. There's nothing that will do more damage to your reputation and cause you more stress than bringing on the wrong client. There are going to be clients, no matter what area of practice you decide on, that will never be satisfied. And those folks are the ones that I like to say, give it a go-away fee. If they're intent on getting a fee quote, price it so they leave and they don't come back. You just don't want to take on every single person that comes through the door, and while starting a firm is going to give you that sense of, oh no, the bills are due, I've got to accept this case, that case, it can turn out to be a headache down the road. I have a case right now that's a sex offense case dealing with a pastor at a local church. The case is 4 years old. And I wish I didn't have it. I'm still doing everything I can for them. But by this point, we've done nothing but lose money on the case. So saying no, while I understand everybody wants to help when they can, for your own mental health and well-being, it may be in your best interest to sometimes turn people away.
Well, and to follow up on that, Ryan, this is Sam. We've talked about in today's digital age and the internet and LinkedIn and Facebook and all of that. If you have a client that doesn't fit your profile or that's not going to be happy, it takes them 5 seconds to start dinging your reputation that you've taken so long to build up by posting, negative reviews on this website and that website. It's so much easier to just say no, not to deal with somebody. Not only from a financial standpoint, it might be a bad case, but if they're never going to be satisfied, it can just harm your reputation in the community.
And I'd like to follow up on what Sam and Ryan have been saying, too, about these last 2 points and how important saying no is. By explaining this idea that you explain to the client who you are first, this is a good way of finding out whether or not you think this is going to be a good client or not. And routinely on criminal cases where I do not know the individuals, I say, before you hire me, I want you to meet with me. I want to meet with you. Let me explain to you my approach. And I'll give you an example. For some individuals who are in the public eye, they feel they need to comment on their case. And if that's not something I feel it's appropriate, I want them to know that this is not a case in which we can be making public comments and having discussions with the news media about the accusations. If they're not willing to accept that from me, I'm learning that this is a client that feels he knows better than I do how to run the case. That's not a good beginning to a relationship. So you can identify a few key things that you think are important to the case and how you want to manage it. It could be that you want to use investigators to a certain extent, that there'll be some expenses for that, or an accountant, or something like that. See how this potential client reacts to that. So the first meeting is a good way of identifying whether or not you really feel this is going to work out, and I think it's well worth it. That's one of the advantages to private practice and a small firm that you don't have, as I said, in government work or a large firm, that ability to decide who gets on the bus with you. And I think one of the most important points in all these slides is this: don't be afraid to say no. Because, as already has been noted here, that a bad client can not only make your life difficult, but he or she can ruin your reputation. And it actually can negate all these other goals that we're saying are so important in terms of developing your identity. I had a co-defendant once who had a very good lawyer, and the first exhibit they put into evidence, it turned out it was a falsified exhibit by the defendant's client. This was a client who not only would not listen to his attorney, I saw him mislead his attorney. And that's something you want to look out for, those clients who are going to mislead you in their representation. So to the extent that you can do some integrity testing in that first interview, it's going to help. And another reason it's important to say no is you want to be available when that next client comes in who wants to hire you. You want to make sure that you're available. And one of the things that I have found that has really worked for us here is by saying no, we are more available when the next case comes in. We are not precluded because we're so tied up doing other cases that really aren't getting us where we want to be. So the ability to say no includes clients who may be willing to pay you lots of money and, more than satisfy what you think is a fair fee. But I have found, too, that even though that person may be willing to pay the fee that's a very good fee, that person has such an unrealistic expectation of what you can do that they're going to be dissatisfied. And dissatisfied clients can harm you publicly. They can harm you by coming after you later. And that's the type of thing you're looking for in that first meeting. So saying no means clients also who may appear to be financially very well off, able to afford your services. And I can add parenthetically that in a couple of these cases, clients who I rejected after they came in after that initial meeting, when I saw what happened with that case, it's exactly what I thought would happen with me. Not only were they convicted, they went after the attorney was blamed. It was not a successful relationship for that attorney who picked up the client. So I think it's a very important point. It's one to stop and think about, and one, as I said, that's going to open your doors to other cases so that you're available to spend your resources on the cases of the clients who help you get to your goals that we've identified.
And as far as, and this is Ryan Stump again, to develop the unique skills and traits of the practice, one thing that I always tell folks, whether it's a new hire or a new lawyer in the community, is to maintain consistency in your work product. One of the biggest gripes we get from people that call our office is, they wanted to go the cheap route initially. They get a public defender appointed to them, and they're just not getting the level of service or attention they want, even though they're not paying anything. It's very important, no matter how minor the case may seem to you or how major the case is, to always put the same amount of effort into each and every case. That way you develop a reputation as somebody within the community and the legal community that is always going to do everything they can for the client. And that kind of dovetails into the role of personal attention and service. In the criminal area or criminal practice, a lot of people need hand-holding that may not need that in other areas. They're going through probably one of the most stressful times of their life. Every time I walk into court, my client may not walk out with me. So the anxiety that goes into that, you have to kind of put yourself in their shoes. And while you may be busy, you may have a lot going on, if it's somebody who calls in, all it may take is a simple email or a quick phone call back to talk to them and put them at ease as to what may be coming up or what any updates in the case that you may have. I've found a lot of people, they get the impression that we only have court every month or two. They feel like there should be updates every other day, and that's just not realistic. So it kind of goes back to that slide before of setting the tone in the initial meeting of this is how things are going to go, this is what to expect. And identifying the skills in marketing and client communications. Nowadays with social media, everybody thinks that that's the easiest way to contact you, that just because they're on Facebook at 2 a.m., that means you are, and that you need to be answering any questions they may have. I advise people to use the traditional means of communications with clients. As far as marketing goes, the social media is great, but if you get too personal with the client, they start to look at you as something different other than the attorney that's helping them through their situation. It's almost like you're a buddy, and they expect that level of attention that's just unrealistic for what you're doing. For client communications, I always tell people to keep everything they can in writing. Clients a lot of times will call in and want answers just because it's easier. They may be on a lunch break. Follow up with them in writing so you always have documentation of what's been going on in the case, so that if there's ever an issue down the road or they get on one of these social media outlets and start trying to blast you or the firm, you can easily respond to it because you have documentation. Always pay attention to what clients at the end. I always ask folks when we're done with the case, what did you enjoy? What could I have done better? I ask them to write reviews, and always pay attention to what the strengths are, what you're good at doing, and you can always use that again back in that first meeting. If you've got clients that are always saying, you're attentive, you're very responsive to the issues, you're good at explaining, dumbing things down to them so they understand what's going on. You want to let the potential client know that as well. Some folks aren't willing to write reviews, so that's where it comes into you using that. And it goes without saying, obviously, that if they point out any weaknesses, those are some avenues or things to work on.
And if I could follow up here, too, the role of personal attention and service. Obviously, when you're smaller, I think it's easier to do this. It doesn't have to be just you. You can use your staff to return calls, sending copies of items. But it goes beyond the individual client. As someone who works for other attorneys, corporations as local counsel, and I deal with general counsel, one of the things I found that they really like, and the reason they come back, is we notify them of what we're doing. It sounds basic, but they're looking to know what's going on in their case. They want to be informed. A short note, a short letter, a short email, this is what happened today. Even if they don't respond, I've been told later on at least a handful of occasions by corporate counsel, they really appreciated, even though they weren't talking to me, they sensed they knew what was going on in the case locally. That's why they were satisfied with what I did and why they would come back and recommend me to other general counsel. So personal attention is important also to companies and businesses and large law firms that you may work for, which is one of the areas, the niches that I have is working for other attorneys. They want to know that if their client is your responsibility at the local level, that they're in good hands, that they can rely on you, they can trust you, and the way they do that is by looking to see, do we know what's going on? And you'll find that even on the individual client level, that's one of the biggest concerns and complaints I've heard from clients that come to me from elsewhere was they didn't get attention, they didn't know what was going on, the attorney didn't seem interested in the case. That may have been true, but you don't want someone to say you're not interested in the case because you haven't communicated with them.
And Paul makes a good point. Having been doing this stuff for so long, I think we forget this is might be our client's very first exposure to the legal system. They have no idea what's going on. If all they get is a once-a-month phone call saying, hey, our next court date is here, I'm going to need to come in, they spend the rest of the month wondering what's going on. So the personal attention, the consistency in your work product and your style also, all of these things help with your reputation. If your clients are happy, they know what's going on, they're going to be willing to refer you to other people, which is going to bring in more business. Again, all this stuff kind of meshes together. The client is the key to all of this. They're the ones that pay our salaries. We want to keep them happy. It might be a simple case to us, but for them, it's something that might change their life. So the next slide is developing relations with other attorneys. Obviously, everyone that's licensed in each state has certain mandatory CLE requirements. This is one of the best places to reach out and meet folks, either if you want to look into a new area of the law or specialize in a certain area, you're going to meet people there. It's networking. I try to go everywhere with a pocket full of business cards. If I meet somebody, I give them one. It may not pay off today. It may pay off a year later. Your consistency in your work product, if your adversaries know that you know what you're talking about, they're going to respect that. One of the best compliments I've ever received was in a federal criminal case when we were done, and the prosecutor came up and said, if I ever get in trouble, I'm going to call you. So they are a good source of referrals also. Now, Paul can probably talk more about developing relationships with the large law firms. Paul, would you mind talking about that?
Sure. I think, we, particularly when you're running a small practice, you don't think that large law firms are your necessary allies or that you're in the same world. And through some cases that I had where I did work with large law firms or firms from, major markets like New York City, what I found was they look for lawyers, for example, to help them on cases that they have outside their geographic area. So they may want you as local counsel. They may want you as to just take on a case. You have to, when you realize that what they're looking for is someone who's qualified and competent that they're going to feel comfortable referring someone to. It could be even people that they know that come to them looking for representation on a criminal matter. But what you have to do is look for the opportunities to work for those firms. Because what I found is that in smaller communities like I'm in, they don't know the lawyers here because they live in a different world. So you want to find the opportunities, whether it's through CLEs, through cases, and in one major example for me, it was by working a pro bono case that I developed a relationship with one of the nation's largest law firms to reach out and, again, show them the skills that you demonstrate every day. And when one of those partners says, you know what, you're the best local counsel we've ever used and seen, that's quite a compliment, and that's why you get the referrals. And I think we can look to large law firms in our own communities, too, because some of them do not practice in the areas that we practice in, perhaps like criminal law, and therefore they need referrals to reach out to them, find ways of making contact with them through bar association events so that they know that you're interested in helping them. So those large law firms can also be in your community, and these firms sometimes are your adversary, and I think too often we view adversaries as being enemies, and they're not. I think one of the greatest sources I've had of referrals is adversaries, and what that means is you are treating them the way you would want to be treated. That means you're making their life easier, and that means like when they have a letter request, you respond. When they phone, you respond. If they come to your office for depositions, you make sure they can park easily. And I've had that said to me, the way you treated us is why we want to refer this client of ours to you for this matter. We don't handle this area. We think you'd be great. We like the way you handled the case when you were our adversary. So I think there's several key points here, and the out-of-town attorney, the large law firm attorney are tremendous sources of referrals for you, but you have to look for it. If you don't look for them, if you don't cultivate those relationships, they're not going to be thinking of you when they have to go elsewhere. And they may even wind up going on the Internet, which isn't always the best way to find an attorney, but they make the same mistakes that individuals do when it comes to finding good attorneys sometimes.
Absolutely. I travel outside of Charlotte to a lot of the smaller counties, and I'm always talking with the local guys. The perception, at least in North Carolina, is Charlotte's the big city, and what is the big city lawyer doing here in our little town? And I try to do the best I can to show them that that's not who we are. So that goes back to the whole image. I see some of the folks from Charlotte that go to these smaller towns, and they act like, hey, I'm the big city lawyer, and everybody treats them like that. So a lot of developing the relationships with other lawyers, I mean, it kind of comes down to the golden rule: treat others as you would have them treat you, and it goes a long way. If I'm in one of the smaller towns for a case, I'll meet some folks, get their cards. Then if I have something that I'm not willing to do, I'll refer to them. And that's another source of referrals back to me. So now loyalty to the lawyer or the law firm where you work. Obviously you can't not be loyal to who you work for. It goes back to doing the best job that you can, maintaining that level of professionalism. You're in the spotlight all the time. Everything you do speaks to your reputation, how you treat your client, how you treat your adversaries, how you treat the court, everything that you do. All of that comes back to your reputation and help building this boutique law firm. Brian, do you have anything about any of these?
Just one thing to add for the out-of-town attorneys. One thing that I've noticed when you're a small firm and if you end up taking cases like we do, which is across the entire state, a lot of these guys and girls can help you if you can't make it. Let's say I'm stuck in federal court in Charlotte, but I have another case in Raleigh. You know, you always want to have contacts where you can reach out a couple days before and ask one of them if they don't mind continuing the case for you. And obviously you would do the same favor for them. So, you know, we always get that perception, like Sam said, of when we walk into a smaller town, everybody thinks, you know, we're there in the nice suit and the nice tie, and we think we're better than everybody. But if you conduct yourself as humbly as you can, when you go into different areas, you'll get much further, not just with the prosecutor, but also from the court as well. And at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to decide the fate of the case that you're there to handle.
And following up on something Ryan just said, when they need help, you're there. We offer our services to out-of-town firms, whether it's filing papers, if they're in a crisis, something has to get done, we're in the state capitol, we're here. And in one situation, there was a mistake in a brief. We had to make the corrections in a brief before they were filed at the last minute. We'll do that, make sure they're delivered. Letting other firms know you're around to do that, those little things go a long way in their remembering you when they need an attorney in your community.
And not just that, as far as in the community, but also if they have especially, you know, in criminal cases, they may not really have somebody they trust or somebody that does great work in their county. So it may help them in the long run to bring you in, which would help you if they have a case with multiple defendants. As far as and I'll speak briefly on the misuse and use of technology. I typically tend to use traditional means in the sense of either phone calls, which nowadays would be email, versus written letters. The only time that I use a actual letter to the client that I mail to them is for a disengagement letter. If we decide to move on from representing them. But what I don't do is I do not hand out my cell phone number to any client. A lot of lawyers are different from me on that, and the reason that I don't do that is I want to have a separation between the relationship I have with the client. I don't want it to become something more personal, and they feel like at any given moment they can send me a text and expect a response immediately. Now that doesn't mean if I'm at home after hours and somebody sends me an email, I can tell that they're worried about a certain issue or they may have a question that needs answered. I can respond that way. I don't, like I said, I don't give out my cell phone number so they can call me on my private cell phone or send me a text message. The downside and benefits of technology in communicating with a client, I think there's benefit, but I think there's more downside in the social media age today. You know, what I see a lot of my colleagues doing is they're bashing a particular client, and while they're not saying the name, they may make some snide remark in their Facebook post or on their Twitter account, whatever it may be. You know, you never know what's public and what's not. You may have a certain setting that is private, but the minute somebody shares it, now it's public because their posts aren't private. You don't want to get into a trend or a habit of bringing your work into your social media platforms and the technology that you use to market the firm. You know, all it takes is one person seeing that, taking a screenshot. They're posting on Google Plus, they're posting on LinkedIn, on Yelp, whatever area they can, that they can post a review, and that's what's going to show up when people search for your firm. Obviously, the benefits are that it helps you stay in touch with the client when you're not in the office. Even if it's a quick email, that sometimes can do the trick versus making a phone call. If you're in court, you can send a quick email to clients or staff, whatever it may be, that helps grease the wheels and make you more productive while you're sitting in court versus back before we had all this available to us, you're writing up or you're typing up letters and mailing them out, which that's going to create backlog. So the biggest point that I would make here is be careful what you're posting because you don't know who's going to see it. I am friends with a lot of judges and a lot of prosecutors. So the last thing I would want is, even if I'm posting about a prosecutor or a judge in a different county or district, one of the people that I work with on a daily basis here may see that, and now they may be hesitant to trust me because they don't know what I'm going to say about them down the road. So just always be mindful that no matter what you're on, everybody's watching, and while you think it may be private, you may find out the hard way that it's not.
Ryan, if I could make a few comments here too. One of the benefits of traditional communications like phone calls and in-person meetings is that human element. Now, sometimes that's very much part of your identity. We think we provide personal service here. If that's something you're trying to provide, some of the newer technologies really cut into that personal level of communication. We find, for example, voicemail, which we have, kind of hurt us a little bit in terms of staying in touch with people. We try to make sure someone always speaks to a person so that they know what's the nature of the call, is it important to them. And remember, that's not just for clients. That's for our adversaries. And we found that one of the comments we got from other attorneys was they like the fact when they call us that they can always reach somebody and they felt that they were being attended to. That's part of our identity, and that's by using old-fashioned technology of having an individual answer the call. The other thing I want to mention about a downside of some of these technologies is, from a risk management perspective, you're not documenting the communication. It's hard to have a record of a text. Yes, you can do it. It's difficult. We like to have good documentation of our client contacts, information about cases. We find that's very helpful, and that some of these newer technologies cut into the ability to do that.
I won't do that. Okay, thank you.
So the next area is how to develop firm identity, and again, all of this kind of intertwines. It's based on your work product, your current clients, your past clients, what you're saying about. Some of the things that you can do to extend, I guess, your identity are, like Paul, Ryan, and I have written books for LexisNexis, doing speaking engagements such as this webinar, teaching CLEs. There's all kinds of ways to get your name out there. Now, as far as developing, your niche website, we hire a company to do that for us. I mean, we have our identity as criminal defense lawyers, so our website is geared towards that, along with our office. I mean, it's kind of the whole package. What image are you trying to portray in order to get those clients you've identified that you want to get? You don't want to have a outer law boutique firm and then have, the most modern of offices. Everything has to fit. As far as paid marketing efforts, I know that we get probably 20 calls a week for these SEO companies. We're going to get you on the first page of Google and all that. There are so many different ways to advertise what you're doing through television, radio, print advertising, the internet. The best way, though, is to identify what it is that you want to do, the clients that you want, and that's how you develop this firm identity, is we're the go-to people. If you have this issue, come to us. We're going to do a great job, and you're going to be satisfied at the end. Paul, what do you think of that?
I think you're right. In terms of this niche website, for example, we think we do a lot of personal service. So what we do is we try to show who we are. A lot of photos of ourselves. A lot of websites don't do that for law firms. Our stationery is very personalized and very individual. It's who we are. But just think about that, the type of place that you want to project yourself. You want to be a comfortable place because you have personal service. So again, this goes back to the first slide, really, who you are and what you want. I think it's important to talk about money. An older attorney taught me about this a long time ago. And the reason I'll make a couple quick points about this, you should make sure that you have enough money available so that you can do what we're saying, which is when someone comes in the door and says, here's a good chunk of money, but you know this person's not the client that you want, doesn't meet your profile, that you can say no. It gives you a safety net when you know, look, I have sufficient reserves, I can weather a storm if there is a storm. Now, we found that there usually hasn't been a need for that, but it gives us, again, a certain psychological security. The other reality is sometimes it takes money to develop cases that you want to pursue, that you might have to advance money on, not just personal injury cases, but other forms of litigation. Sometimes you need to have adequate cash available. And finally, sometimes you need money for development and the things that we're talking about. You know, it can cost money, whether it's the website, doing photography, making sure that you develop your marketing skills. I think you should make sure that you're comfortable in your level of capitalization to meet your goals, even if you don't have to touch what I call the reserves. And finally here about pro bono, one of the ways that I developed my expertise in election cases and election law was through getting involved in a voting rights case about 15 years ago. And that voting rights case gave me a chance to not only develop the litigation skills that I like, but also develop an expertise in an area of law that very few people had, which has continued to this day. And that's what a pro bono case can do, as well as connecting with other firms from outside your area that you may never have met otherwise. And in a case like voting rights litigation, it gave us tremendous relationships with the community that we didn't have before. So I think you can't have your practice run around pro bono, but you can have it be part of your practice. And think about that case that may be available that might help you further one of your interests. And again, if it does, I think there's tremendous opportunities with pro bono to help yourself develop the firm, as well as some very satisfying relationships with attorneys and the community. And those community relationships, again, become a way of developing your clients as well as the cases that you want. So I think it's a good thing to consider the role of pro bono as part of your plan for your practice. It can be very satisfying, and it can be very rewarding also in helping you grow and develop the practice.
And what I'll add to that is, you know, when it's like when a kid starts driving, you know, you don't want to give them a Lamborghini to start, but the pro bono cases serve as, I mean, we're all human, we're going to make mistakes, especially if you're new. And it allows you to, you know, work your way through some of the issues and mistakes you're going to make with a client who isn't paying you, which they're obviously going to be more upset if they felt like they were duped at the beginning, and you talked up this reputation, and then you get in court and things don't go like you planned. The other addition I'll add to the slide is the pro bono work, I think is, especially in the criminal area, is way more beneficial with the judges than it is attorneys. You know, you are going to find it more beneficial if you're always in front of judges. They see your face, they see your name, and they see that how you're handling cases. You're not going to take a case to trial that shouldn't be tried. You're going to get more credibility down the road when you have a case that you're looking for some leniency or a favorable ruling, if that judge is familiar with you and knows your track record, versus I'm only in here for paid cases. You might see me once every couple weeks, you don't get a chance to know me. So there's a lot of benefits pro bono work can add to the firm. I'll echo Paul. I mean, especially here in North Carolina, you're not going to survive on doing just pro bono work, especially even if it's court-appointed work, just based on what they're paying folks. But you get to rub elbows with everybody you're going to work with on a daily basis, and it's going to help you in the long run.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for a great presentation. We're currently in the process of unmuting lines for questions, and I also want to draw everyone's attention to the instant message feature at the top of their screens, and they're also able to send questions that way. One of the questions that we did get in through our chat feature was around negative social feedback. If someone is really dissatisfied with what your services have been and are just really sending a lot of negative feedback over social channels, what are some of the ways that you've dealt with it?
This is Ryan. I can answer that one. I always respond. Obviously, you don't want to come off combative. If there's an issue that they have with either the representation or how they feel like they were treated, at least respond so that other folks that may be looking for you on these outlets or researching the firm can see, look, they didn't just ignore this client, they addressed it. While the client still may be upset, at least they tried to put the issue to bed. We have a situation where, and this is the one that bothers me about social media more than an actual client, somebody who's never hired our firm for some reason got on Facebook and gave us a 1-star rating. Never had the guy as a client. Facebook won't take it down. So that is the issue you're going to run into. It's a catch-22. It's easy to get your name out there with technology, but at the same time, it allows people to bash you when they shouldn't necessarily do that. So what I always do is at least respond so that people down the road can see they're attentive to the client or the previous client, and they're at least trying to address the issues to make the situation better.
The other problem you get into now is people comment on you or your firm based on the cases you represent. You see that in comments on news stories sometimes. I'd just caution you to be very careful in your responses that you do not do something that makes the problem worse, whether it's adding fuel to the fire or doing something that's inappropriate and unprofessional. Because unfortunately, sometimes the people who critique have a little bit more leeway in how and what they say and do than the attorney does. But this would go back to that slide on some of the downsides of current technology, is it does open the door to this type of negative comments that are very difficult to erase and undo. But again, if you keep commenting on them, if you talk about them more, you can actually make it worse. It's a great question, and I think one that may be worthy of a follow-up webinar at some point.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from the audience at this time? Okay, well, we are right at the 2 o'clock mark. Again, thank you so much for your time, and I hope everyone found this session valuable. Again, within a few days, you'll receive an email with a recording of this webcast along with this survey. We really appreciate the time that you take to respond to the survey because it helps us improve as well as figure out additional topics that would be of interest to you. And with that, thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.